All right, welcome back to the Hip Hop Scholar Podcast. I am Melanie, the host and the Hip Hop Scholar, and this is where beats meet bibliography. Today's guest is an artist who stands in a space where observation meets expression, where introspection becomes lyricism, and where identity is not just a theme, but a lived practice. We're talking about and welcoming Dark Identity to the platform. Dark Identity is part of a generation of artists who are not afraid to slow the tempo down and let the words carry the weight. His music invites you to listen closely, to pay attention, and to notice what's happening beneath the surface. There is intention behind his pen, and there is purpose behind the delivery, and there is a steady commitment to telling the truth, even when that truth is quiet, reflective, as well as deeply personal. His catalog reflects that journey. From Misinformation to Noah's Ark, from Lady Luck to People Watching, and into newer releases like Date with Destiny. The work shows a consistent evolution. These titles alone tell a story. They signal thought, narrative, and perspective. They suggest an artist who sees the world symbolically, philosophically, and socially, and who uses hip-hop as the medium to unpack all of it. People Watching especially stands out as a moment of reflection. It captures that instinct many artists have, but don't always name. The instinct to observe and to study people, to read their energy, to translate the everyday into something meaningful. It reminds us that some of the most powerful hip hop comes from paying attention to the world all around you and turning those observations into art. Yet Dark Identity doesn't just make the songs, he builds atmosphere. He builds space for listeners to think. There is something deeply introspective about Dark Identity's approach. The themes feel internal and external at the very same time. Personal, but also social, quiet, but still powerful. And that's what makes this conversation important. Because hip-hop has always been a site of identity construction, a piece where artists work through who they are, where they come from, and what they see, as well as how they make sense of the world. And Dark Identity is part of that lineage. His work leans into thought, reflection, as well as self-definition. When you listen across his releases, you can hear the consistency in vision. You hear someone committed to craft and documenting perspective. Someone who's willing to sit with the hard questions and understands that sometimes the strongest voice in the room is the one who is paying the closest attention. And that is truly something to celebrate. So, Hip Hop Scholar family, a warm welcome to the Hip Hop Scholar Podcast, Dark Identity. That's right. Let you get your flowers. How are
Thank
you?
you. Thank you.
You are very welcome. How are you today, Dark Identity?
Doing quite well. Doing quite well. Saturday, just chilling out. So relaxed from a long week. So, how are you doing?
I'm doing so well. Thanks so much for asking. Yes, the weekend, definitely taking the respite from the work week, but also the work of hip hop, wanting to take the time to unpack with you, to speak with you, and learn from you. And so we're really excited to have you on the platform today. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I've watched, the Hip Hop Scholar podcast. I've watched a couple episodes, and you do a really great job. So I'm sorry I don't have a great intro like you gave me, but I mean you're doing phenomenal. So keep it up.
Oh, that
Yeah.
means so much. That means so much. Thank you so much for that. That is a labor of love, and a compilation of the stories of hip hop artists, right? The real artists that are out there, not just celebrities that are making the money when it comes to the music, but those who are drawn to hip hop for a very organic and real reason. And so that's what is my magnet to people, is being able to, really look at what real artists. That's why I was like, no, I don't want to wait till March to interview you. I want to interview you now as soon as
Yep.
possible because you really truly have something to say. So I want to unpack that with you. And I'm glad we were able to get us scheduled sooner than later, right? So let's start with the very first question. I think you know what I'm going to ask, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Every artist I speak with, when did you fall in love with hip hop? Take us down memory lane.
Yeah. So I do actually have a moment for this question because I didn't really grow up with hip hop as a kid. I came to this country as an immigrant, right, when I was 8 years old. So hip hop wasn't, in my family. It wasn't all around me. It wasn't anything like that. I grew up in New Orleans though, and I hear you're from Louisiana.
Hmm.
So I grew up in New Orleans, and around the time of Hurricane Katrina, I was in high school and my family evacuated like many other people did. And I remember I didn't take much because I thought we'd be back in a couple of days. But one of the things I did take was my CD player, and I had just bought the first two hip hop CDs I'd ever listened to. And I'll never forget, it was Master P, The Last Dawn was one album, and the other one was 50 Cent's The Massacre. So it's right around that time, right? 2005. Um, so I only, took, a small backpack, a few changes of clothes, but I did take that CD player and I just listened to those albums on repeat. And that was kind of like my, introduction to hip hop. And what I loved about it, because the question is, what made you fall in love? What I loved about it was not necessarily like the subject matter was I couldn't really relate to it necessarily, but it was more how the artist was expressing themselves, how they were observing the world around them, just like you just said, and how they were delivering it through poetry, essentially, right? And there was so much musicality to it. It's not just words, it's cadence, it's how you're using your voice, it's the vocal presence, right? um, so that all that together kind of came together in that moment where I didn't have a whole lot to do and I was looking for an escape. So that was kind of, I'd say, the moment for me.
Wow, such an intriguing story. Many people that I do speak with, we've grown in hip hop. It's something that we've always known, but I'm always interested in the artists who are being introduced to different genres, including hip hop. So, a very beautiful story of coming to this country. Same as my husband. My husband is from El Salvador. He came into America when he was 16. So I'm a little older than you, but also in that same respect of learning the American way and the American system, very different from where you're from. So I'm real interested as well. Hurricane Katrina was devastating, and none of us knew it would have been so devastating. But to have Master P and 50 Cent, two very formidable powerhouses, two giants even in the hip hop game, that being your introduction, it's definitely making a connection to the music that I've heard from you because of the storytelling and of the grassroots opportunities that they created, starting from nothing, from hustling to being something of businessmen in an industry and in an Americanized system that doesn't usually recognize us as being a part of that. So to be a leader in the industry and to be poets at the same time, that you are exactly the audience that they were trying to reach. And so you growing from hip hop there definitely that I couldn't really select two better artists for you to be able to have. That's awesome. That's an awesome story, Dark Identity.
Oh yeah, sure. No, thanks, of course. Yeah, so yeah, those albums are forever a place in my heart. So yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so with that, then, so you were introduced with 50 Cent and P at the time, 2005. So when did you realize that hip hop was something, not just music for you to listen to, but became a voice and an outlet for your own expression?
Yeah, that was a little bit later for me. So, a couple of years after that time, I started getting more into East Coast hip hop, and I started listening to Nas. And I started really digging into Nas, as so many hip hop artists do, right? It's right at the top of a lot of people's lists.
Hmm.
Is probably my biggest influence, and that's why I take so much care with my lyricism. It really comes from him. So, when I saw how he took it to in the next level with lyricism, with storytelling, um, with just how he was touching on so many different topics in such depth, and so much knowledge, and the way he was using his words just so beautifully. That's what took it to the next level and made me think, huh. like, I'm not I'm obviously not at his level, but maybe I could try to write something, and maybe I can, let's just see where it goes. So I started writing, and I had I had this small mic in my closet, in my bedroom closet, as I was finishing out high school. Um, and I used to just rap on it and on my computer and record songs. It wasn't anything good, it was probably pretty terrible to be honest. But that was when I first started. Those were the first songs that I had written. But it was his influence that got me going. Um, so yeah, it's around the time end of high school is what I'd say. Yeah.
That's awesome. That time of growth and going from adolescence into adulthood, and just having that that strength to say I'm going to pick up my pen and write. That's the beauty of hip hop, is that nobody has to be quote unquote great, right? The greatness is categorized with award shows and with sales and such. But that expression of self, I think that's what's not think, but I know that's what's most important when it comes to what true hip hop is that it is a way for you to express yourself and to grow from there. So you are right there in the pillars of hip hop. Dark Identity is that you found a way to find your confidence and to build from that. And as you're navigating, learning from it, shout out to Nas. Nas has been in the game for a very long time, and his growth is immense, which is why he is, one of the top MCs and really forever will be, because of the grit and grind that he shares in his lyrics, in what he portrays and shares. And it can go from being introspective, it can go into being, entertaining. There's just a very beautiful thing that hip hop can just be whatever you need it to be. And so for many of us, right, Dark Identity is that, hip hop becomes a way of expression. It becomes a way of being able to say what we feel, and being in and observant in the rooms around us, in the places that we find ourselves. So before the music, who were you before hip hop then? And then how did that version of you shape the artist that you are now? So before hip hop and then getting into hip hop, take us on that journey.
Yeah. So I mean, before hip hop, so I immigrant kid, came here when I was 8 years old. Very heavy accent. I don't, and a lot of people tell me now you don't have an accent, but you're an immigrant. And I was like, well, yeah, I came to this country and I kind of adapted, right? But it's forever a part of my mentality is because I remember coming here. I remember the plane ride coming here, right? So that was kind of shaped me as, okay, I'm kind of an outsider, to start out with, right? So I had that identity of like, okay, I'm something different, but I want to blend in. But it took me a while, of course, as I got older to feel okay being different, right? Every kid goes through that in some form or fashion. Um, so then, I came to this country, 8 years old. I was a pretty normal kid. I mean, nothing, nothing jumps off the page. I did pretty good in school. I worked pretty hard. I was in a marching band in school, so that's a big part of Louisiana, New Orleans culture is marching
Mm-hmm.
bands. I was in one, so that was actually before hip hop. That was probably my first like foray into music. Was I played clarinet and I was in marching band. It was all kinds of music. Like we had some hip hop, but mostly like pop, old rock, all
Mm-hmm.
the classic marching band songs that you hear at football games in high school. So we played all of those. But that was my first introduction to just understanding rhythm and understanding cadence. How you use different notes, and so I'd say it was some of that. Again, I did pretty well in school. I worked hard. It was part of the immigrant kind of mentality my parents had instilled in me. Right? They came here for a better life for their kids. So, me and my sibling we were trying to live up to that. So, yeah, that was kind of the beginning. I'd say I was a very introverted kid. I was very much in my head, and you can see that in my music, right? It's so there's a lot going on up here, and I'm trying to put it into the song and express it in words. Um, so I think eventually all of that influence kind of I found a way to harness it and put it into my writing, um, and it's been a continuous journey for me into my adult life. So
Oh wow! So you're a
yeah.
musician. You are a musician to start with, and you knew about music. You knew about the beat, the tempo, but you also knew how to rock a crowd. You know, especially being
Yeah.
in a band during a football game, you know how music can sway the emotions, can really rise the occasion, and so you were really gaining speed and getting ready for rocking the microphone as a solo artist. And hip hop is based on outcasts, right? Like I think that for many of us and many of the people that I have interviewed, feeling like an outsider, feeling like not being understood. Many people, like you said, you being in New Orleans, which is based on New Orleans bounce and a certain like type of a sound, but also listening and really being connected to East Coast music. That's also a piece of being an outcast where, I like the music that's here, but I'm more connected to music that's on a whole different coast. And being able to assimilate in all those different structures, and still, fine tuning who you are, especially coming from a different country and learning the American way. There's a lot of different, there's a lot of observations that are there, right? There's a lot of
Hmm.
things that you had to learn of self and of others, to go and grow through that. And I really hope that you still have that pride of where you're from, that pride of where you've been, and being able to navigate the challenges. It's no short feat either to be a good student. Even if it's a C average, you were still able to navigate a very challenging time. So you have to be proud of that. I want you to celebrate that as well. Being able to come into this country and then finding your own and your voice and building from that, because your music, it has evolved, right? You have that evolution from your music, and so continuing to do that, like I push that upon you, is to continue to express yourself and to grow in your music, because there is something there. There is something very special that's there, dark identity. So please continue to grow in that journey.
Oh, thank you, Melanie. I appreciate the kind words. I mean, yeah, it is very much my passion. So the writing will never stop, I assure you.
That's right.
And
It better not. That's right. You never
yeah.
stop writing. And so thinking about the very first, from your first song to your last song, People Watching is one I just listened to it not too long ago. What inspired that particular track, and what were you noticing about the world when you wrote that song?
Yeah, so the inspiration from that came from a time actually I lived in New York City. I lived in New York City for about um, the city, Manhattan for about 2 years, but I lived in the area for about 4 or 5 years in my during my 20s, and it's such it's America in like a tiny space, right? It's a complete melting pot. People of all different cultures, all different income levels, different situations in life, and the one place you'll see that the best I found was on the subway, on a New York City subway train. So you'll see all kinds of people on there, and what I always found so fascinating is the people watching aspect of
Mhm.
being on subway trains, and you can just see like there's a whole story behind somebody who's sitting right next to you, and it's a completely different life experience than you've had. Just thinking about that, thinking about how many different life experiences there are on this subway train, that always blew my mind, right? So I was trying to capture that into a song, and at the same time, make it about what I'm imagining those people would be going through, right? So it's
Mhm.
it's not just like who they actually are; it's my perception of them, and I'm trying to capture that in the lyrics is the stories. So
Oh yeah,
yeah.
that's profound even, and insightful to think of the narratives of others, and it changing every single time. Like that is an author's dream, is to have so many stories that you can use, and whether it's the truth or not, right? Everybody is somebody in their own life journey, and being able to honor that. I think that is very honorable for you to consider Dark Identity is the story, are the stories of others as you watch them go through, a daily life, no matter what they may be going through, affluence or not. That is the beauty of New York, is having that melting pot of everyone, and everybody is essentially on the same track, so to speak, with the subway. But taking that empath of approach, though, that's very different, is being empathic with that and being able to observe and wanting to know more, and really taking the nuances and the details. So when you were saying that, it makes me wonder even more so now about your name, Dark Identity. So why that particular name, especially since you're observant of other people's identities? Break that down for me today.
Yeah. So that name, it took me a while to come up with, and I think I liked it because there's kind of multiple meanings to it, right? On the surface level, like Dark Identity, I'm dark skinned, right? So there's, that's kind of the first meaning that you can take away, the more obvious one. The deeper one, which I think you're getting at, is that behind every person, right, there's so many different identities, right? Like for me, musician is just one identity, right? And that there's different types of musicians. This rapper, I just told you I played in a band, right? But I'm also a father. I'm also a husband. I'm also, a businessman in my day-to-day life. I'm also a son, and there's so many different identities that people don't get to see about you. Most people that you interact with only see one version of you, right? Like I'm talking to you right now, Melanie, the hip hop scholar. That's how I know you. That's how I perceive you. But you probably got several identities yourself, right? And parts of you that I'll never see, or most people will never see. And so it's all those hidden identities, dark identities, that I'm trying to find a way to reflect into my music. And it's the realization that all of us are like that. We're an amalgam of experiences, right?
Oh, yeah. I like that. I like that a lot. Giving that perception to people, and presenting that, but always remembering, there's a realness behind this identity that you're, introducing to people. There's always two sides to every story, and there's multiple sides to a person. The professional person, that personal person, but even that intricate, delicate person with your family and your friends and the different hats that people wear. I like that. That's very interesting when it comes to Dark Identity for your name, but also in considerations of others. So not only is it your stage name, but it's also your approach to music is considering the dark identity of people, the dark identity of the environment and the atmosphere. It does sound very multi-layered. That's dope. Super dope.
I appreciate that. Yep. Thanks for the question, though. You're the first person who tapped into that. So, yep.
Oh yeah, they don't call me the hip hop scholar for nothing now. Let me tell you.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a reason for everything, and wanting to unpack that so that we have a better understanding. This podcast is designed, again, for real artists like yourselves, Dark Identity, to be able to teach us and unpack this with us, and also even for self, the importance of that and how super dope it is that you have a name that also represents what you do. Like, that's not for everybody. Some people like, oh yeah, I got this name because in high school, I played football and something or another, but yours is very, intentional, where this name is not just because I'm a dark person. It's because the identity that everybody has can be very dark and hidden, but you see it all. Like, that's your goal, to be able to observe and see it all. I see what you're doing there.
Yep. There you go. You hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
Hip hop scholar indeed. Yep.
That's right. They don't call me that for nothing. Yet again, with the music, with hip hop, it just allows for us to be able to do so. That's another intriguing aspect of you and your music, is that, it leans into that, that identity seeking and wanting that realness to be there. You're not here to be another Nas or another 50 Cent. None of that is there. You're there to be You're like one of my other artists that I've interviewed. You want to be the first me, the first Dark Identity. And that's the absolute goal, and being able to see the truth of others and the truth of, life as it is.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. That's exactly right. I mean, look, we already got Nas, right? We already got 50
Mm-hmm.
Cent. We don't need another one. They're already great. So,
That's right.
so yeah, what the world needs is you, right? So that's the way I approach it. Absolutely.
That's real. That's real talk. That's real talk. So then, when you are writing, do you start? Tell me about when you're writing your music. Are you just writing lyrics, like you have a journal, or do voice notes where you have the lyrics? Is it a beat that you have first, where you have a beat and then you write to it? Is it a feeling, a mood? Like, tell me about the process when you start to create your music.
Yeah, that's the tricky part. It comes in multiple ways. I
Mm-hmm.
wish I had like a set formula, and maybe one day I will. But right now, it's coming to me in multiple ways. So a couple things I do, right? One thing is more, I call it like brainstorming. So whenever you go about your day to day life, and I hear something, I hear a phrase, or I read a phrase, right? And the words jump out at me. I'm like, ooh, I should use that in one of my lyrics. And I jot it down on my notes app on my phone so that I don't forget it. And I've got like tons of these right in my notes. I just got like just random words that I liked, or phrases that I liked, or even thoughts that I thought, and I just write it down. I save it for later. Um, and when I write a song, sometimes I look at those notes and I say like, hey, was there anything interesting that I thought of recently that I want to use in a lyric, maybe in an interesting phrase? So that's one way I do it. Another way is what you said, recording a voice memo. So sometimes if it's less about the words, but more if I can hear just the rhythm in my head, or a certain cadence, that sometimes I wake up hearing this stuff, and like there's literally a rhythm stuck in my head, and
Mm-hmm.
I just want to not lose it. I record a voice memo, and then later maybe I use that in one of my songs. um, the more formal way to do it, all of this songwriting stuff is, yeah, you start with a beat, and then you start intonating sounds over it, and you find what that rhythm, the cadence is, what that feeling is, and then you start putting that into words. So it starts off with like just sounds, and then you're kind of putting the words in, you're filling them in. I do have a notebook. I'm still the old school. I actually write out all of my lyrics. It's just how I've always done it since high school, and I don't think I'm ever going to lose that. Um, yeah, yeah. So it takes me a while to write my lyrics. I'm not like, I don't sit down in an hour and write 3/16s and I'm good to go. My lyrics, like, I mean, you could tell, like, they're very intricate, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I rewrite things a lot, and it takes me a while to write a song that I feel content with.
Absolutely. The
Yeah.
literacy educator in me is so proud to hear about that. Like, you're actually listening and having the time to, be literate and read through things like, wow, I like this phrase. Let me keep this phrase. Right. And being immersed in the words, like that's a etymological, using etymology even in your writing, and then writing all together. This new generation of a lot of artists where it is the voice notes, it is the typing, it is even going to chat GPT to type and so on and so forth. But those journals, though, that journal writing is a classic way, even timeless. And I encourage you to keep up with those journals, even for your future children, for your future audiences, to have that, because that's an archive. That is a collection of several thoughts that you've had. And we can take the time here too, Dark Identity, because that haunting. I say that there is a haunt that happens when you have that beat inside of you that doesn't let go until you create something. It's very much so a challenge to hear something and then to write it or to create it, to put it into a visual. That is a cognitive um, system that is very specific in hip hop, to take a beat, to take the words and things that you're feeling and hearing here, and then to produce that in writing, especially in the way that it makes sense. Because things that we're feeling and hearing and listening to, that's in our brains may be jumbled around, and being able to place that on paper, that's a top tier way of thinking. And so none of that you've discussed is very small or just easy to do. That's a very intricate way of thinking and bringing things to life. So I encourage you to keep up with that, but also the authenticity of that. That screams authenticity with your identity of creating with that pen and pad. That is a feat that is, again, reminiscent of classic hip hop too, of being able to put your lyrics down and to write that down. So yes, that is a top tier way of thinking that I know helps in the leadership in every business and every aspect that you promote in life too.
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely. So.
Oh,
Yep.
yeah. I think so. I truly believe that. And so with being able to write and put those, and voice notes are still good, even the digital way. I'm not, saying anything negative about that. But how do you stay authentic? Talk to us about the process of Dark Identity maintaining his authenticity as he's putting those lyrics together instead of, joining the trends and trying to replicate things that you've heard. Talk to us.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's always very tempting, right? You hear all these artists, and especially like hip hop nowadays. There's so many different types of artists in hip hop, and so like, there's nothing new under the sun, quote unquote, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, there is no other you. So you got to bring yourself into the song, and again, like, you're an amalgam of experiences. No one has your specific combination of experiences, and you got to bring all that into the song. So for me, look, to answer your question plainly, it's not worth making music unless it's completely me. It's really not, it's not worth it. Again, the world doesn't need another Nas or 50 Cent. They already got those. And it's something for me, right? It's a passion. I want to feel proud of it. I want to feel like I'm sharing a bit of me, and recording it like it's history, and sharing it with the world for others to relate to, hopefully, and maybe they appreciate it. So for me, it's just about what's worth me putting so much time and effort into, and it's only going to be worth it if it's completely authentic, and it speaks to my experiences, my thought process. So yeah, I always try to remember that when I'm writing songs. Like, what is this song really about? What am I trying to say here? And if I'm not crystal clear on that message, then my verse really doesn't go anywhere, and I kind of got to start again. I've done that many times. I've started the verse all over again because I was like, you know what, it doesn't feel like me. So, yeah.
And that's essential. That's vitally important. I teach my students as a professor. I share with them that you have to be so confident in what you create that the applause is just extra. Having people to clap and to celebrate what you have created is just an additional thing, not the main thing. Being involved and, loving what you've put together, that's the most important thing. And so I also ask artists, and I'll ask you as well, this word success. Like, what is success to you? Is it having the millions of followers? Is it having the millions of dollars? Which, we all could have the millions of dollars. I know that. But the success in a song, how do you know? And what does success mean when it comes to your creation of music? Because this is more than just a pastime. It's more than just a hobby. This is, how people breathe. This is how people are able to really, make sense of the world, in between those times when you have the hats of a spouse and a child and a parent and such. So what is success to Dark Identity? And how do you create that success?
Yeah, yeah. It's not a finite thing in my mind. To me, it's just about continuous improvement. So if being successful in a song to me is if I did something on the song that I didn't do on my last song. If I did something 1% better, that to me is success. And I carry that mentality not just in music; it's in everything I do in life. And if I can be just 1% better at something each time I do it, then it's success. So it's a continuous thing. It's a continuous spectrum. It's not a finite goal like I have earned $1 million that's great. We could all use it. I agree, but but yeah, it's it's not always going to lead to happiness either. So yeah, that's the way I look at it. Yeah, yeah. How do you
That
define it? I'm just curious.
I appreciate that question, right? That 1% better though, that's from that Atomic Habits book I've read before,
Hmm.
that being that 1% better. And then for me, the word success definitely is something that has to be personal. It has to be being able to set a goal, meeting that goal, and then celebrating that goal, no matter how big or small it is. And I've been an educator for over 23 years. But even in that regard of the success of my lecture or the success of a lesson, it is in making certain that others are able to receive it. I don't want for it's just like what you said too. Like I tell my students, there are many different vocabulary words that I can share, I could show off, my vernacular of knowing all of these big words. But if you're not learning, if you're not actually attuned and can understand what this lesson is about, then it's all for nothing. So, yeah, I got the big jargon words and I can come at this great blazer, but I want for people to really understand where I'm coming from. I want that authenticity and the joy for me as an educator, for an example, the success of educating people and them finding their vision of success, and knowing that they have the confidence and the ideas that can absolutely change the world. As a podcaster now, this is something new for myself. The success for me here is making certain that I get the stories from real artists and share them in the most authentic and real way. Nobody's paying anything, there's for no, and that is purposeful. Like, I don't understand how people pay to do podcasts. It is so important for me for people to have the opportunity to share their stories, to build this organically. Yeah, I could buy you could buy bots, you could buy the followers and get the likes and all these other different things, but that's so unreal. But
Hmm.
being able to have a conversation, and I think that's what people appreciate most, is that I do my research. I give a lengthy introduction. I had somebody complain, oh, I've watched this for 3 minutes and she's still talking about the introduction. Well, you do what you want on your platform, but I want for my artists to understand how gifted they are, how important they really are, especially contributing to the genre of hip hop. And that, as a scholar, myself being a scholar, my research is in building this type of qualitative data so that these stories are absolutely relevant in an academic and scholarly way, not just lost in cyberspace, but to be seen as classical music. Hip hop is truly classical music, where we don't have to look at Beethoven and Tchaikovsky and read Shakespeare and that be deemed as classical. Like, no, one day a student is going to be studying Dark Identity and listening to his music and being able to form their thesis and grow from that. That is what's going to be my success with this podcast. And that for me, in a nutshell, is what success is to me.
Wow, well said.
Yeah. you know,
Yeah.
just to, that I appreciate, I don't ever really get questions asked. I've never actually been interviewed on a podcast. But again, it's important for people to be able to learn from each other. Like you were saying too, being on a subway, I wonder if the people knew how important they were to you. Right? It's important to you to be able to understand and want to know, what is your journey right now? And I bet that if you were to take the time to listen and they talk to you, if you had the time, you would absolutely do so. And that right there, again, is so profound, that I'm so glad that you were able to share that and we captured that, because that's something that is so important. And I want for people to
Hmm.
slow down and really understand the people around you as we learn and understand ourselves as well.
Absolutely. Yep. And by the way, don't let anybody tell you your intros are not good. And they're phenomenal. Actually, before I came on here, I kept wondering to myself, like, I wonder how much she's gonna say for my intro, because like, is there like really like 2 or 3 minutes that you can actually cover on me? But man, you did your research and you knocked that one out the park. So good for you. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I really do. It's a labor of love. My husband supports me. He's like, because, it takes a lot of time. It takes time to do so. But my husband will tell me, he said, yeah, you say you don't feel like doing it, but as soon as you get in the camera and start talking with people, I light up. Because again, it is a joy to allow for people to share their stories and to talk about their music. And even for you, your catalog, Misinformation, Noah's Ark, Lady Luck, Date with Destiny, there's a philosophical tone there. So not even just hip hop, you're bringing philosophy in. So when you're naming these projects, talk to me and tell us about the intention with naming those projects from a philosophical perspective.
Well, I don't want to just name songs, whatever, just to get, clicks on it. It has to connect with the deeper meaning of the song, right? Misinformation, that whole song is about just that, right? It's about me being drawn into online misinformation and that affecting me mentally. It's also a metaphor, right? That if you listen to the song, you know what that is. So it connects back to what I said earlier, right? Every time I sit down and I write, I gotta figure out, what is this song really about? What am I trying to convey to my audience? And that theme is carried throughout the lyrics of the song, but it's also there in the title. So, same thing. People watching is an obvious one, right? Date with Destiny, another one. It's if you look at those lyrics, it's very much about, the song's about ambition, but it's also about the what goes on behind the scenes in your mind as you're pursuing your goals. It's the self-doubt, right? It's capturing all of that into that title, the Date with Destiny. So it's all thematic for me. It all connects back to the theme of the song.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it is very much so aligned. And then those everyday experiences, how are you translating that into something lyrical and meaningful? So you're taking observations, you're watching people, but then you put that into lyricism. It was that song Date with Destiny. When I heard that song, I was like, oh no, let me get back on this message and say we need to talk sooner, because you've been able to capture this in such a way. Talk to us very briefly about that, the translation of being able to take those experiences and put them into your lyrics.
Yeah, it's not easy, right? So I've got to sit there and figure out, okay, what's the song about, and then you got to figure out, okay, what are some of those experiences that I want to include in the song, and then I got to figure out, okay, but what's actually interesting about those experiences that I want to share, right? What's worth somebody hearing and taking away from my song. So there's a lot of, like you said, there's a big philosophical component that goes into it for me. And then, finally I get to what are the words that match up with it. So, I think of it like, if you're a painter and you're sitting down and you got a blank canvas, right? And you're trying to imagine, okay, what am I trying to share? And you're imagining a particular scene, and it's figuring out what are all the things that belong in that scene. Right? Like, what are all those experiences from my life that belong in this picture? Why did they belong? How did they contribute to that overall message of the song? So, everyday life, I mean, at least for me, it's pretty monotonous. I pretty much do mostly the same thing every day. If somebody looked at me, they think, oh, this guy's kind of boring. But it's, if you really dig deeper, there's so much interesting to say about all of us. But people just don't take the time to really think about what they're doing and who they are and what they're bringing to other people. So that's what I try to do. I try to connect all of that into my music. I read a lot too. Because it helps me kind of remember I'm not just, in this, monotonous pattern. There's a bigger world out there. And then I take some of those ideas and I connect it back to my life too. So I use all these tools to basically brainstorm for my own writing. If
Absolutely.
That makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. Makes perfect sense. Of course, you sound like a reader. Like, you sound like, oh no, you're very well educated. And when you were saying that someone would say, oh, you have a boring routine, well, that's that dark identity. That's that facade that you're placing for people to think that, oh yeah, coffee and then lunch and then newspaper. Like, no, there's so much deeper to that surface, and that's for everyone. And to understand that part, people that don't allow that people that feel like, this boring routine, this has to be me and this is all there is, that's where depression, I feel like, comes from. That's where those negative feelings where, if I'm not able to do this routine, if I'm unable to, really express myself in some sort of way, that's where trouble comes in it. And then this next question definitely kind of gets us into that. What is the hardest truth that you've ever had to write into a song? The hardest truth ever.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that is a tough question. Um, the hardest truth. Well, you know, my recent song, "Date with Destiny," there was a section of that song where it's kind of buried in the middle of the song. Um, I get into a little bit of my childhood, and not just coming here as an immigrant, but I get into a little bit about my background of why I have this perfectionist mentality, and where it comes from. And then I start talking a little bit about my dad, and growing up as a boy and an immigrant boy, and wanting to basically meet his standards and impress him and make him feel proud of me, right? So it's I dug pretty deep there, and then it's basically admitting to myself, right, that I'm seeking approval from somebody else, and that that carried throughout my childhood, also when I finally left the house. But now the reason I'm such a perfectionist is because I got used to that feeling of, oh, I need to seek approval from someone else. Except now it's not my dad; it's myself. It's the guy in the mirror who I'm seeking approval from, right? So I just got in that habit of seeking approval. So I basically replaced my dad with myself, and that it was that realization, that truth, to your question, that I came to as I was writing that song.
Wow, that's deep. That's really deep. I'm gonna re-listen to that song and look for that section specifically, because that and the way you broke it down just now too, like word, because to go from seeking a parent's approval to seeking your own, right? Because that measure of wanting to be the best and wanting that good job, pat on the back. That's something that is maybe not easily attainable, and may have been something that you may not have ever got received. And if you did receive that, still that perfectionism and everything, like that drive of wanting to continue to gain that approval, but then transitioning that to your own, that's philosophy. That's the intention and purpose that I hear, where you're not just sharing that and expressing that of self, you're teaching that to the audience to also do as well, where the approval and the love that you seek is right there in the mirror,
Hmm.
and digging deep into those roots, into why. So, shout out to you, Dark Identity. That I'm glad we got that question. Most importantly, received that answer, that response from you. Well done.
No, no, I appreciate you asking. Yeah, that was a yeah. I had to think about that one for a second. So good question.
Thank you, thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah. I have a few more. I got a few more fun type, personal, intriguing type questions. So let's see. If you could sit quietly and people watch anywhere in the world for inspiration, where would you go and why?
Ooh. Um. Okay. Let me pick something different than what I said about New York. Let's see. Anywhere for
Anywhere in the world.
inspiration.
Hmm.
You know, I think I would actually go. I think I would actually go to like Japan and Tokyo, and some of those areas around there. Um, here's why. Like I actually had this experience. I visited Japan once for a few days many years ago, just on a kind of a fun casual trip with some of my classmates from school, and um, I was just fascinated by their culture. I was fascinated by how kind people were, how they treated us, foreigners in their land. But then I got to thinking, wow, these people are, I mean, they've been here for like, you know, generations. Ancient, right? So
Mm-hmm.
there's so much history on this land, and there's so many different periods that they've gone through, and you can see that in their culture and how they carried themselves. Um, I felt like I didn't get enough time there. I only went for a couple days, but it's always kind of been on my list. It's like I got to get back there and kind of I want to learn a little bit more about what I saw. So yeah,
Japan.
yeah.
I kid you not. Whenever someone asks me about, what's the goal for this, like, what do you want to do? I name Japan. I say, I want to go and do like a hip hop conference or a hip hop exhibition or some type of lecture in Japan. I say that. I've not been to Japan just yet, but that's one of my dreams. One of my goals of success, even, is to absolutely go to Japan and to share the culture of hip hop. Yeah.
Hmm.
So I'm right there with you. Oh, yeah.
Go for it. Go for it. And when you do it, make a podcast, and I'll be watching.
Ah,
Promise. Yep.
I sure will. I'm gonna make that happen. That will come to pass for sure. So let me ask you another one. Let's see. Tell us this. What's one thing about you that fans would be surprised to learn? You have fans. You got plenty of fans out there. I'm definitely one of them. So what's
Ooh.
one thing about you that we will be surprised to learn?
Surprised to learn.
Hmm.
Um, so I'm a marathon runner. Um, yeah, I'm pretty big into running. So I don't know if that's like a surprise, or it's more just something you don't know about me. About to put it that way, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, I'm pretty big into running. I got into it about 7 years ago. I'm very, very diligent about it. I have a whole like spreadsheet where I track how many miles I ran every single day. Um, and I run several. I'm more of a half marathon guy. I've only run actually one marathon before, um, but yeah, it's something I've been doing for a while. It is actually one of the main ways I keep up with music is on my runs. I download an album. I listen to it for 40 45 minutes while I go on my runs every day. So that's how I keep up with just the volume of hip hop that's out there nowadays. It's also, any for most people that run, it's good to get away. It's a way for me to relax, even though it's exercise. So yeah, I'm a huge runner, Melanie. I got a half marathon coming up in 2 months that I got to prepare for. So I've been slacking a little bit. So yeah, I gotta get on top of that. But yeah, I'm pretty diligent. I've run 1,000 miles or more every single year for the past six. So yeah,
Oh wow. Yeah, the Excel sheet. That's surprising. Like you're not just
yeah.
running, you are intentional and making certain looking at that data and those miles and I wonder how you choose the music you're going to listen to. Like you have a playlist or you just kind of let it go random? Like how are you doing the music? I want to know.
Oh, I'm pretty intentional. I even before my runs, I actually download a few albums that I want to listen to. So, right now of course Cole dropped his album yesterday, so I was
Oh
listening it
yeah.
on my run yesterday, but I kind of want it's one of those things where you want to listen like a few times to really, get really pay attention to all those songs. So right now I'm on his stuff. Next week it'll be somebody else, and I'll listen to that album a few times. So I'm very deliberate about it. I don't really go to the playlist all that much unless there's really not an album I'm excited about listening to.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
no randomness. No, you want specificity. Yeah, that
Hmm.
J. Cole, my son, my oldest son, he sent that link to me as soon as it came out. And so right now I'm on number three, Safety. I think the name of that is Safety. So I'm listening to that song right now. Like, wait a minute, let me put this on repeat. I want to hear some more of this. Wait a minute. So yeah,
Yeah.
okay, super cool. That's super dope. And yeah, good luck in that marathon and all your future marathons as well, Dark Identity. Yeah.
Absolutely, Melanie. Absolutely, yeah. And hey, when you listen to the J. Cole album, wait for the song where he's mimicking Biggie and Tupac in a conversation. You like that one because I know you're a hip hop historian.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I haven't unpacked with my son just yet. Like he texted me this morning, like maybe about yeah, he texted me this morning. I didn't get the text, and then right before I got ready for the podcast, he was like, "Hey, you ready to talk?" Like, wait. So yeah, I gotta catch up. Definitely, I gotta
Mhm.
catch up too. But I had to definitely make the time to speak with Dark Identity. I have one more question for you today, and you are always welcome back on the podcast. So this is not just the first of one, but one of many for you to come back. You are more than invited to do
Thank you.
so. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
So, 10 years from now, when people look back at your music, what do you hope they say about the Dark Identity?
Craftsman, um, somebody who has a deeper message, had something to say, has something to say with his music. Yeah, important to keep that in present tense, not past tense, because in 10 years from now, I still want to be making music,
There you go. There you go.
right? Nas is making music in his 50s. I got to make music into my 50s too. That's the way I look at it.
That's right.
So, yeah, just intentional. Still true. Somebody who's true to themselves, has something to say about the world around them, as well as digs deeper within themselves. So, yeah, a lot of the same stuff that I'm going through right now. Or that I want to be perceived as now. I hope that carries with me a decade from now as well. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Craftsman, an empath, a runner, but definitely was always true to himself. And that's, again, most important. That's a great answer. Just 10 years and even 100 years from now, and all the years that archive that you're building, this legacy that you have created, is definitely going to reach the masses and continue to teach just as it is now. It has just been an absolute pleasure to speak with you today, Dark Identity, and to be here with the Hip Hop Scholar family. One last word from you, though. I think I do want to give you one last opportunity. If there's anything you'd like to share or say, I want to give you the last word for today's podcast.
All I want to say is, Melanie, thank you very much for having me on here. As I said before, I think you're doing an excellent job shining light on a lot of artists that are just coming up, who may not otherwise get a spotlight. And like you said, you're not charging anybody for it, so you're just reaching out, getting them the opportunity in a very grassroots way. As soon as I found you, and I was connecting with you, I saw that come through in the quality of your videos. I saw the authenticity. So please keep it up. I hope you never lose that passion even on days maybe where you don't feel like doing it. I know that work ethic that you have is gonna drive some great results. So great work, and thank you for having me.
And thank you for that lasting word. It already has. This is a great
Yeah.
podcast with a great artist, Hip Hop Scholar family. Y'all check out his music. It's tagged in the description below. And with that, we're out of here. Peace.
Have a good one.